5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Start. The court assembled to consider a matter of significant constitutional dimension, wherein the validity of certain statutory provisions under a prevailing legislative enactment has been called into question. The petitioners have approached the court invoking its jurisdiction, challenging the impugned provisions on the grounds that they transgress the bounds of constitutional safeguards afforded to individuals and, therefore, merit judicial invalidation. The primary contention advanced by the petitioners is that the impugned provisions operate in a manner that is arbitrary, excessive, and incompatible with the established constitutional framework governing the protection of fundamental rights. It is asserted that the provisions in question are not narrowly tailored to achieve a legitimate objective and instead impose unreasonable constraints upon personal liberties. The petitioners emphasize that the impugned law lacks a rational basis, is disproportionate in scope, and thereby fails to withstand constitutional scrutiny. According to the petitioners, the impugned provisions confer unguided discretionary power upon implementing authorities, thereby creating a potential for abuse and rendering the legal framework incompatible with the principle of legal certainty. The provisions are also challenged on the basis that they suffer from overbreadth, resulting in a chilling effect on legitimate conduct, and are therefore violative of the principle of substantive fairness. It is contended that the legal text, being excessively vague and indeterminate, deprives affected persons of a reasonable opportunity to regulate their behavior in accordance with the law. The petitioners further submit that the impugned framework does not satisfy the requirements of necessity, proportionality, and minimal impairment, as laid down by the court in the development of constitutional jurisprudence. In their view, the legislative intent, while ostensibly directed toward a public purpose, has been effectuated through means that are disproportionate to the ends sought to be achieved, thereby rendering the impugned enactment constitutionally infirm. In response, the respondents have opposed the petition and submitted that the impugned enactment falls within the domain of legislative authority and has been enacted pursuant to a lawful exercise of legislative power. It is contended that the impugned provisions serve a legitimate and compelling objective, being intended to address matters of pressing public concern. The respondents assert that the legal framework under challenge forms part of a larger legislative initiative aimed at promoting collective welfare and ensuring the orderly functioning of society. The respondents also invoke the principle that legislative action is entitled to a presumption of constitutionality and must be accorded deference by the judiciary, save in cases where a clear and demonstrable violation of constitutional norms is established. According to them, the impugned provisions are the product of considered deliberation and policy assessment by the competent legislative body and, as such, are not liable to be interfered with lightly. It is further submitted by the respondents that in matters involving policy formulation, particularly where competing public interests are involved, the legislative body is vested with a wide margin of appreciation. The respondents argue that the judiciary ought not to substitute its own view of policy efficacy for that of the legislature and must instead adopt a restrained approach, intervening only where a law is found to be manifestly arbitrary or unreasonable in its application. The respondents also contend that the impugned enactment contains adequate procedural safeguards and is supported by an underlying regulatory rationale that meets the test of reasonable classification. They deny that the provisions result in indiscriminate application or that they confer excessive discretion upon the authorities. According to the respondents, Any incidental impact on individual freedoms is proportionate and justified by the overarching public interest the law seeks to advance. Upon hearing extensive oral arguments advanced by both sides, and considering the substantial record comprising pleadings, annexures, and judicial citations placed on file, the court has deemed it appropriate to reserve judgment. The court has observed that the matter raises complex and multifaceted questions concerning the scope of constitutional protection, the limits of legislative authority, and the standards governing judicial review of statutory enactments. In view of the potential impact of the matter and the importance of a reasoned and thorough adjudication, the court has directed that the interim position be maintained. Specifically, the court has ordered that no coercive measures be taken against the petitioners pursuant to the impugned provisions, pending the pronouncement of the final judgment. This direction has been issued to preserve the rights of the parties and to prevent any irreversible consequences that may arise during the pendency of the proceedings. The court has further directed those written submissions, if any, be filed by all parties. The court has emphasized the importance of clear and precise articulation of legal arguments and has encouraged the parties to assist the bench by highlighting relevant doctrinal principles, comparative jurisprudence, and interpretative approaches. The registry has been instructed to ensure that all case records, pleadings, and cited materials are properly compiled and made available to the bench in a structured and timely manner to facilitate efficient deliberation. The matter stands adjourned without fixation of a specific date, with liberty granted to either party to mention the matter for early listing in the event of any emergent development warranting urgent judicial attention. In conclusion, the court has reiterated that it remains mindful of its constitutional duty to uphold the basic structure of the constitutional framework and to act as the sentinel of individual rights. At the same time, the court has acknowledged the institutional boundaries within which it operates and the deference due to the legislative process. The court has assured the parties that the matter will be adjudicated with due regard to constitutional principles, established standards of review, and the overarching objective of ensuring justice in accordance with law. In sum, the matter before the court embodies the delicate balance between individual liberties and legislative intent pursued in the public interest. The arguments advanced reflect foundational constitutional principles, fairness, reasonableness, and the rule of law requiring careful judicial scrutiny. As the matter now awaits final adjudication, the court's interim directions aim to safeguard the status quo and prevent irreparable harm. Stop.